been promising for a while to fire this up this spring. I've not touched it since last fall. I did empty the fuel out of it, and I had a question or a request to discuss the fuel mix, so before I start it up I'll do that. The container that comes with it is only marked for the 35:1 fuel to oil mixture. So through figuring out some mathematical computations, I was able to figure out what a 50:1 mix would be on the container that came with it. So if you have this one, you can measure up from the bottom of the oil reservoir up 2 7/8 of an inch is where I put my 50:1 mark. To be safe, you could go a little bit more than that, but that's after break-in. So again, this container went bad. The cap broke, which it didn't have a 50:1 mix anyway, so I was able to obtain another one through Amazon. I've already mixed this up. It does have the markings for 50:1. I put a little black mark, so I could see it better, but the container is marked how much oil to put in this to mix with the fuel. So I'm going to get the motor ready, get a pail of water, and we'll fire it up and see if it starts. And I will do nothing. You'll see me put the fuel in. I'll prime it. There's a few things we should check first. Each season, or actually with this motor, I would check it each time before you go out, because I've had some questions and comments about the motor. Before we do that, there's some things we should check. So I would recommend probably each time before you take the motor out, especially when you first get it, check some of these things. Obviously, one that has been a problem for people is the pull cord. This is very small, and even though you may think it has wax applied to it when you get it, they don't. I put bee wax on it, and I've not had a problem. This lasted me all last season. I do carry a spare, but it's held up fine. The other thing to check before you go out is your fuel lines, because if you're using ethanol fuel, which we're all having to do, and it says don't use ethanol, I think that's responsible for rotting out these fuel lines. So I just replaced mine late last summer, but I'm checking them, they're fine. The next thing I expect to go bad is the primer bulb. It's up here underneath the carburetor, and let me get you a close-up of that, but that I could see going bad after a season or two. Right now, mine appears to be okay, and there's a lot of bolts you might want to check for tightness. Be careful, do not over tighten. This is all aluminum block, and they will strip out if you over tighten them. So be careful with that, but just make sure everything's snug. You've got a grease zert here. You might want to consider putting a little grease in before you go out at the beginning of the season. I'm just going to do that once a season. So let me turn it back up, and we'll get ready, and I'll put some fuel in it, and we'll see if I can start it on the first, second, or third pull, or maybe it won't start at all. We'll see. Okay, this is spring, or will be spring 2019. This is my new fuel container, and I've mixed the rate at 50:1, and the motor has been broken in already, so make sure you do that first. So I'm going to put a little fuel in, because I'm not going to actually take it out for a while. That should be enough to test to see if it will run. So let me set this fuel can, put it away, and I'll come back and we'll try and start it up. It's important that you have running water available, so in this bucket I'll run a hose to it. And during break-in, I did mine in the winter and I kept putting snow in it to keep it cool. I didn't document that very well, but make sure that you do have fresh water source so you don't overheat the engine. So let me get some water in that bucket. Okay, I've added the fuel. I've done nothing else. So remember the choke On is with the engine running, off is what actually turns the choke on, so I'm going to turn the choke on. I'm going to pump the fuel plunger probably quite a few times. There's 3, 4. You'll be able to feel the fuel when it enters it. Okay, there I got fuel, so I'm going to do 2 more times. I'm going to throttle up about halfway, and we'll see what happens. Just above idle, and so you need to verify that you have that cooling water coming out. When you go to an idle, you can tell the water stops coming out, the propeller's not turning. You can tell when it engages right there. So I'm not having any problems. Okay, that was an honest test. I have done nothing to this since last fall, other than I did change the gear oil this spring before I started the motor, and it had been in there all winter. Now I will say that my garage is somewhat heated. It never gets below about 50 or 45 at the coldest. So it doesn't have a hard life, you know, getting in the extreme cold. But it started right up, it ran smooth. I was interested to see if water would come out of the exhaust port, which it did. The water pump on this system is nothing more than this plastic wheel. And when the engine has enough RPMs to catch the clutch mechanism to turn the prop, this is hooked on that, and I suppose this could strip out or these could break off. So you do want to make sure that you're getting fluid in there. It came with an extra one. If that one ever breaks and I replace it, then I'll order another one. So far, all the parts that I've looked up for this, and I get them all through eBay so far, have been reasonable. I've heard of people having problems with the lower shaft going down to the prop and those gears, but I think that whole unit was, and don't hold me to this, I think $75. And maybe that's pricey when you consider that's almost half of what I paid for the motor. But I'm going to take it out this spring. I'm going to go to a new location. I'm going to try to talk my wife into dropping me off about 20, maybe 25 miles upstream on the Tippecanoe River. And I'm just going to drive it all the way back to where I'm at. So we'll see if that works out. And I'm sure I'll post another video. But until I have a breakdown, showing you how it runs, I'll show you a little bit on the trip on the Tippecanoe River once I get up there. It'll be late spring though, because I don't want to go out when the water's too cold. And I need to wait until the spring floods are done. Don't want to risk anything on that, especially in a rubber raft as opposed to a boat. Oh, one thing I will mention, when I did run that in the bucket, I do have cool water running, and I checked the temperature. You can tell it by feel. Don't let that get too hot if you're using a small bucket like I did. And make sure that you run the water continuously, or at least check it and add water as it needs it. So don't let it overheat that way, especially during break-in. It's better to use a larger size container, but I had to use what I have available. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, and if you're interested in this type motor, it's inexpensive, and we'll see how mine holds up. I've had a lot of comments. People have shared things, and if you share something and it's a question that I can answer, I'll make a short 3-minute video on it. So other than that, I'm good to go for spring and a road trip and a boat trip, and then I'll do some fishing on the side. Before I go, I want to thank everyone that has subscribed and those of you that watch. And if you'd be interested in a lot more videos that I've made just on this boat motor, you could do a search on Boiler Dan 1, and that's capital B, Boiler, capital D-A-N, all one word, and the number 1 at the end of it. No spaces or anything. And you should get a whole list of all the videos that I've made. If I can figure out how to make them play in sequence, I'll do that.